When people imagine surviving a narcissist, they usually picture someone fierce, someone loud, someone who finally stood up, fought back, matched the intensity, and won. We have been taught to believe that strength looks like confrontation, that power looks like dominance, that survival means outshouting the person who tried to break you. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That kind of strength is exactly what keeps people trapped the longest. A narcissist does not fear aggression. They expect it. In fact, they are often energized by it. When you push back hard, when you argue, when you demand accountability, you are still playing the game on their terms. They thrive in conflict because conflict keeps the focus on them. Every argument, every emotional outburst, every attempt to prove your point becomes fuel. And the more forcefully you try to assert yourself, the more they escalate, manipulate, and punish. Many people walk into narcissistic relationships believing that if they are confident enough, smart enough, or tough enough, the narcissist will eventually respect them. That belief is heartbreaking because narcissism is not a misunderstanding that can be cleared up with better communication. It is not a power struggle that can be won by being stronger. It is a system built on control, entitlement, and emotional extraction. When you bring intensity to that system, you don't dismantle it, you strengthen it. I've watched countless capable, intelligent, resilient people get worn down precisely because they believed their strength would save them. They argued brilliantly, they stood their ground, they refused to back down, and over time, they became more exhausted, more self-doubting, and more entangled than ever. The narcissist didn't crumble under that pressure. They simply adapted, twisting reality, shifting blame, and rewriting history until the strongest person in the room was questioning their own sanity. Here's what rarely gets said. Narcissists are remarkably skilled at turning strength into a liability. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your boundaries become cruelty. Your emotional reactions become proof that you are the problem. When you confront them, they don't hear accountability, they hear an invitation to retaliate. And they retaliate subtly, through withdrawal, silent treatment, smear campaigns, or calculated kindness that leaves you even more confused. This is why the loudest, boldest, most confrontational person is often the one who suffers the most damage, not because they are weak, but because they are emotionally engaged. And emotional engagement is the currency narcissists trade in. As long as you are trying to win, explain, expose, or defeat them, you are still deeply connected to the outcome. And that connection keeps the cycle alive. Survival doesn't come from overpowering a narcissist. It comes from understanding that the battlefield itself is the trap. The narcissist wants you fighting. They want you proving. They want you emotionally invested in being seen as right, good, or justified. The moment you realize that, something begins to shift. You stop asking, "How do I beat them?" and start asking, "Why am I still playing?" This is where people often feel disappointed. They want a heroic ending. They want the narcissist to be exposed, humbled, or remorseful. But narcissistic dynamics don't resolve that way. There is rarely a clean victory. There is only clarity. And clarity often feels anticlimactic at first because it asks you to let go of the fantasy that strength looks like domination. The strongest move you can make with a narcissist is not escalation, it's disengagement, not avoidance born of fear, but distance born of understanding. When you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop defending, and stop performing strength for someone who only uses it against you, the entire dynamic loses its grip. The narcissist may label you weak, cold, or indifferent, but those labels are meaningless once you no longer need their approval to define you. This is why the one type of person who survives is not who you think. It's not the fighter, it's not the loudest voice in the room, it's the person who realizes that real strength doesn't try to win in a rigged game, it walks away from it. And that choice, quiet and unglamorous as it may be, is where survival truly begins. Once you begin to understand that fighting harder doesn't free you, the next realization can feel even more unsettling. Survival has nothing to do with getting the narcissist to see you, hear you, or finally understand what they did to you. Most people don't stay trapped because they are weak. They stay trapped because they are still waiting for validation. They want the acknowledgement, the apology, the moment where the narcissist says, "You're right, I hurt you." And that moment almost never comes. Narcissistic relationships train you to chase validation. Early on, there is praise, attention, and the intoxicating feeling of being chosen. Over time, that approval becomes unpredictable. It's given and taken away without warning, and your nervous system learns to work overtime trying to get it back. You explain yourself more clearly. You soften your tone. You present evidence. You hope that if you just say it the right way, the narcissist will finally respond with empathy. But empathy isn't missing because you failed to communicate. It's missing because it was never the point. What keeps people stuck is the belief that validation will heal the damage, that if the narcissist just admits what they did, the pain will make sense. But narcissists don't offer validation as a form of repair. They offer it as a form of control. When they withhold it, you chase. When they give it, you stay. The approval becomes the leash, and you don't even realize how tightly it's wrapped around you. The turning point comes when you recognize that your worth cannot be negotiated with someone who benefits from denying it. The survivor is not the person who finally gets the narcissist's approval. The survivor is the person who stops needing it. That shift is subtle, and it's often misunderstood. It's not bitterness. It's not indifference born of resentment. It's clarity. It's the realization that you don't need a person who harmed you to confirm that the harm was real. This is where many people struggle, because letting go of validation feels like giving up. It can feel unfair. You may think, so they get away with it, and in some ways, yes, they may never take responsibility in the way you deserve. But the real cost of waiting for validation is that your healing is placed in the hands of the very person who wounded you. And that is not freedom. When you stop seeking validation, something powerful happens. The arguments lose their urgency. The explanations feel unnecessary. You no longer feel compelled to prove your goodness, your intentions, or your pain. You start to trust your own experience again. And once that happens, the narcissist's influence begins to fade, not because they change, but because you do. Narcissists are deeply uncomfortable with people who no longer need them to feel real. They rely on being the mirror, the judge, the authority on your worth. When you quietly remove them from that role, the dynamic destabilizes. They may escalate. They may attempt to pull you back with charm, guilt, or cruelty. But without your hunger for validation, those tactics lose much of their power. This doesn't mean you stop feeling pain. It means the pain no longer dictates your behavior. You can feel hurt without chasing comfort from the source of the hurt. You can feel anger without needing to express it to someone who will only weaponize it. You can grieve the loss of what you hoped the relationship could be without asking the narcissist to validate that grief. The most profound shift is internal. You stop outsourcing your sense of reality. You no longer need someone else to confirm that what you experienced was wrong. You become your own witness. And that is the moment survival turns into recovery. This is why the one type of person who survives is not the most loved, admired, or validated. It's the person who can say, "I know what I lived through, and I don't need you to agree." Because the day you stop asking a narcissist to see you is the day they lose the power to define you. Once you stop fighting and stop chasing validation, something else begins to emerge. And this is where real survival takes root. You start to see clearly, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, unsettling way that changes everything. This is the moment self-awareness becomes your greatest protection, because clarity is the one thing a narcissistic dynamic cannot survive. Narcissistic relationships thrive on confusion, on mixed messages, on moments where kindness follows cruelty and cruelty follows closeness. Your mind is constantly trying to make sense of contradictions. You replay conversations, you second-guess your memory, you wonder if you're being too sensitive, too harsh, too demanding, and slowly, without realizing it, you stop trusting yourself. That loss of self-trust is not an accident. It is the environment narcissism creates. Self-awareness is what interrupts that environment. It's when you begin to recognize patterns instead of focusing on isolated moments. You stop asking, "Why did they say that?" and start noticing, "This always happens when I set a boundary." You stop obsessing over tone and start seeing timing. You realize the confusion isn't because you're missing something, It's because the system is designed to keep you off balance. This kind of awareness is not about labeling or diagnosing, it's about observation. You begin to notice the predictable moves, the gaslighting that follows accountability, the charm that appears when distance is created, the victim narrative that surfaces whenever consequences are introduced. And once you see those pate, RNS, they lose their mystique. They stop feeling personal. You recognize them as strategies, not truths. One of the most damaging effects of narcissistic relationships is how they turn your own mind against you. You start doubting your perceptions, minimizing your pain, and explaining away behavior that would alarm you if it happened to someone else. Self-awareness reverses that process. You start listening to your discomfort instead of arguing with it. You trust that uneasy feeling in your body that says, something isn't right here, even when the words sound reasonable. This is where people often say, but they're not always like this. And that's true. They aren't. But awareness teaches you that inconsistency is not kindness, it's instability. The good moments don't erase the harmful ones. They coexist with them. And once you understand that, you stop using the good moments as evidence that the bad ones don't matter. Clarity also helps you step out of the narcissist narrative. Narcissistic dynamics revolve around roles: the hero, the victim, the villain. These roles shift constantly, but they always serve one purpose: keeping the narcissist at the center. Self-awareness allows you to see when you're being pulled into a role that doesn't belong to you. You stop defending yourself against accusations that don't reflect your values. You stop over-explaining to someone committed to misunderstanding you. What's powerful about self-awareness is that it doesn't require confrontation. You don't need to announce that you've figured things out. In fact, doing so often invites more manipulation. Awareness is quiet. It shows up in how you pause before responding, how you stop. Filling silences, how you disengage from circular conversations. It changes your behavior long before it changes anything on the outside. As your clarity grows, so does your sense of stability. You begin to feel grounded again. Your memory returns. Your emotions make sense. You no longer feel like you're constantly scrambling to regain your footing. And that steadiness is deeply threatening to a narcissistic system because it relies on you being uncertain. This is often the stage where people feel both empowered and sad. Empowered because they finally understand what's been happening. Sad because they realize how long they lived without that understanding. But this grief is not a setback. It's a sign that you are coming back to yourself. Self-awareness doesn't make the narcissist change. It makes you unmanageable. It means their tactics no longer land the way they used to. The hooks don't go as deep. The fog begins to lift. And once you can see the dynamic clearly, you can no longer unsee it. Because the moment you trust your reality again is the moment their illusion loses its power. When clarity sets in and you begin to trust your own perception again, the next instinct for many people is to finally explain themselves clearly, to lay it all out, to articulate the hurt, the patterns, the unfairness, and the impact. There's a hope that if you just say it the right way, calm enough, logical enough, compassionate enough, it will finally land. But this is where so many people lose their footing again because narcissistic dynamics do not change through explanation. They change only through boundaries. A boundary is not a conversation. It's not a debate, and it's certainly not a request for understanding. A boundary is a decision you make about what you will and will not participate in. And this is one of the hardest shifts for people coming out of narcissistic relationships because they have been trained to believe that connection is maintained through talking things through. But with a narcissist, conversation is often just another arena for control. Arguments feel productive. They give the illusion of movement. You're engaging, responding, defending, clarifying. But what's actually happening is that the focus stays locked on the narcissist and their version of events. Boundaries do something very different. They quietly move the focus back to you. Instead of asking, "Can you see why this hurts me?" you begin to say, "I'm not available for this anymore." Narcissists are often remarkably skilled communicators when it serves them. They can argue in circles, shift topics mid-sentence, and turn your own words into evidence against you. This is why trying to win an argument with them is so exhausting. You're playing chess with someone who keeps changing the rules. Boundaries remove you from the board altogether. This doesn't mean boundaries are easy. In fact, they can feel incredibly uncomfortable at first. When you stop explaining yourself, you may feel rude, cold, or selfish. You might worry that you're being unfair. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something new. Narcissistic systems depend on your willingness to over-explain, over-apologize, and over-function. When you stop, the system destabilizes. A boundary doesn't require the narcissist's agreement. This is where many people get stuck. They wait for the other person to understand, respect, or accept the boundary. But boundaries don't work that way. Their effectiveness comes from enforcement, not endorsement. You don't need someone to like your boundary for it to protect you. You may notice that when you set a boundary, the narcissist reacts strongly. There may be anger, guilt-tripping, mockery, or sudden vulnerability. These reactions are not evidence that the boundary is wrong. They are evidence that it's working. You've disrupted access. You've limited control. And that feels threatening to someone who relies on both. What's important to understand is that boundaries are not punishments. They are not about teaching someone a lesson. They are about preserving your emotional safety. You are not responsible for managing how a narcissist feels about your limits. You are responsible for managing what you allow into your life. Over time, consistent boundaries change your internal landscape. You feel less reactive, less defensive. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You begin to trust that you don't have to justify your needs in order to honor them. And that trust is deeply stabilizing, especially after a relationship that taught you to doubt yourself. This is where real freedom begins to take shape. Not because the narcissist suddenly behaves better, but because your life becomes less centered around them. Boundaries create space to think, to heal, to reconnect with yourself. And in that space, the narcissist's voice grows quieter. You don't survive a narcissist by convincing them to change. You survive by deciding what access they no longer have to you. And once that decision is made and honored, the dynamic can no longer own you. Once boundaries are in place, something very specific is required to keep them standing. Emotional regulation. This is the part that doesn't get enough attention because it doesn't look dramatic or empowering from the outside. But inside a narcissistic dynamic, emotional regulation is one of the most disruptive forces there is. Not because it changes the narcissist, but because it changes the entire rhythm of the interaction. Narcissists feed on emotional intensity. Anger, tears, defensiveness, desperation. These reactions signal they still matter, that they can still provoke, influence, and control. When emotions run high, the narcissist feels powerful. And they are very good at pushing emotional buttons because over time they've installed them. They know exactly what to say, when to withdraw, and how to create urgency or panic. This is not accidental. It's learned through repeated exposure. Emotional regulation doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop letting feelings dictate your responses. There's a crucial difference. You may feel rage, sadness, or fear, and those feelings are valid. But you don't automatically act on them. You pause, you ground yourself. You choose your response instead of reacting on impulse. And that pause is where the narcissistic cycle begins to break. This can feel deeply unnatural at first. Narcissistic relationships condition you to respond quickly, to defend yourself, to clarify, to fix misunderstandings before they spiral. Silence can feel dangerous. Neutrality can feel like abandonment. But what you slowly learn is that urgency is part of the manipulation. The faster you respond, the easier you are to control. When you begin regulating your emotions, the narcissist often escalates. They may provoke harder, say more extreme things, or accuse you of being cold or uncaring. This is a predictable response. They are testing whether the old buttons still work. Emotional regulation doesn't mean you engage less because you don't care. It means you engage less because you care about yourself. One of the most powerful tools here is neutrality, short responses, calm tone, no over-explaining, no emotional commentary. This is not about being passive-aggressive or withholding. It's about not giving emotional energy to a dynamic that consumes it. When there's no drama to feed on, the narcissist becomes restless. The interaction loses its charge. People often worry that emotional regulation means becoming someone they're not, that it will make them numb or disconnected. But what actually happens is the opposite. You become more connected to yourself. Your inner world stabilizes. Your moods are no longer hijacked by someone else's behavior. You stop feeling like your day depends on how the narcissist is feeling. This shift also helps you see just how much chaos you were managing before. You realize how often your emotional state was being yanked around by someone else's needs, moods, and reactions. Emotional regulation brings a sense of dignity back to your life. You are no longer performing emotions to be seen or heard. And here's the part people don't expect. Emotional regulation often leads to clarity about what's next. When your nervous system calms down, your decisions become clearer. You're no longer making choices from fear or desperation. You can see options. You can plan. You can imagine a life that isn't organized around managing someone else. Narcissists may accuse you of changing, and they're right. You are. You are no longer available for chaos. You are no longer a reliable source of emotional supply, and while that may not stop them from trying, it dramatically reduces their impact. You don't break free from a narcissist by outreacting them. You break free by becoming unreactive. And the moment your calm becomes stronger than their chaos, the cycle begins to collapse. After the fog lifts, after validation loses its grip, after boundaries are set and emotions are regulated, there is one final shift that defines true survival. And it's the hardest one for many people to accept. Survival does not end with winning, proving, are being understood. It ends with letting go. Letting go is often misunderstood. People hear it and think it means forgiveness, reconciliation, or pretending nothing happened. It doesn't. Letting go means releasing the need for the narcissist to be different than they are. It means stopping the endless mental rehearsal of conversations that will never happen. It means accepting that closure may never come in the form you deserve. This is where the fantasy finally dissolves. The fantasy that one day they will have insight, remorse, or accountability. That fantasy is deeply human. It comes from empathy, from the belief that if you could just get them to feel what you felt, everything would change. But narcissistic dynamics don't resolve through insight. They persist through denial. And waiting for that breakthrough keeps you emotionally tethered. Letting go is not passive. It is an active, courageous decision to stop organizing your life around someone who cannot meet you in reality. It's choosing peace over proof. And that choice can feel incredibly lonely at first, because it means stepping away from the drama that once gave your suffering a narrative. Many people ask, but if I let go, doesn't that mean they win? That question reveals how deeply the dynamic still frames the story. Narcissistic relationships turn life into a competition. Who's right, who's wrong, who's the victim, who's the villain. Letting go is how you exit the competition entirely. There is no winner because you're no longer playing. This is also where grief shows up in a different way. Not just grief for what happened, but grief for what never will. The relationship you hoped for, the apology you deserved, the version of them that only appeared in moments. Letting go means mourning that loss without asking the narcissist to participate in the mourning. And here's the paradox. The more you let go, the stronger you become. Your energy returns. Your thoughts stop looping. You find yourself laughing without guilt. You stop checking your phone with dread or anticipation. These are not small changes. They are signs that your life is becoming yours again. Walking away, emotionally, mentally, or physically, is often labeled as weakness by those who benefit from your staying. Narcissists may mock it, minimize it, or rewrite the story to protect their image, but their version of events no longer matters when you are no longer inside their world. Real strength is not staying to fix what keeps breaking you. It's recognizing when your presence is the only thing keeping a harmful system alive. When you step back, the system collapses, not with drama, but with irrelevance. Letting go also doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing yourself in the name of caring. You can hold compassion without access. You can understand without excusing. You can move forward without erasing the truth of what you endured. This is where survival becomes freedom. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need witnesses or validation, the kind that shows up in your nervous system, your sleep, your choices, and your sense of self. And when all is said and done, the one who truly survives is the one who chooses peace over proving anything at all.